Before we deal with the witnesses, Chair, I would like to, with your leave, move an application that has become necessary, notwithstanding our significant efforts to land at a different place, and that is an application for an in-camera hearing. This week
That does not relate to this witness.
No, this week we intend to lead 3 witnesses. The first will start today in a public hearing, and so will the second. In the course of preparation, we encountered challenges with the third witness. And the third witness deals in particular with the Port Shepstone drug theft of the 541 kilograms of cocaine.
And that witness is coming on when on?
Is scheduled for Friday. We understand and we are persuaded that in the past 12 months, significant strides have been made in the investigations, and quite a lot of information has been unearthed relevant to the whole investigation. Chair and commissioners, you must not lose sight of the fact that this is an incident that arose in June, and there had been, the progress in regard to investigations was less than ideal until recently, well, not as where recently means a year ago. And significant strides have been made. There is a concern that public testimony regarding the Port Shepstone theft would jeopardize both the investigations, secondly, the identities of confidential sources, potential witnesses for subsequent criminal prosecutions that will follow, and inadvertently disclosed potential suspects for prosecution. In our engagement with the witnesses and the law enforcement agencies, we sought a via media, which was to have the witness testify on camera, which is off-site, but to be heard in the auditorium. That situation would constrain the witness, and that the witness will not be able to unpack in detail what the investigations have so far, as if that would only serve to prejudice the commission, because the commission will not have a full appreciation of what happened and how it came to be. We are now at a point where the witness's reluctance is compelling us to move for a complete in-camera hearing, where he is willing to disclose everything that the investigations have uncovered, but only if it is in camera. So the application we are moving before you, Chair, today, as the commissioners would know, this week and next week we are running the drug bust stream, and the witness for Friday is specifically for Port Shepstone. And we are requesting that this witness's testimony be held in camera, where he will make, based on the docket as it currently stands, actual seizure of an harbor and the circumstances surrounding that, the handling of the seized drugs and subsequent storages at DPCI Port Shepstone offices, the subsequent actual theft of these drugs from the Port Shepstone offices, and what the investigations have uncovered thus far as regards that theft. And the evidence of potential witnesses the investigators have obtained relating to all the above issues. So it will be a complete and full disclosure to the commissioners regarding these matters, except that it can only happen if it is in camera.
As you know, you must give notice, 72 hours notice.
We admittedly, we don't. We don't, Chair. We're just shy of 72 hours.
So you are seeking condonation for?
Firstly, seeking condonation. And in fact, my appearance today to move for the application was to save, quote unquote, the appearance of the witness, because it had come to a point where the witness was completely reluctant to appear. So I'm quite appreciative of the fact that we are shy of the requisite 72 hours, so therefore non-compliant, and it would be appropriate for the commissioners to condone the non-compliance. But the case we make is that we as evidence leaders are persuaded that it is appropriate that it be granted.
Do we at this stage grant a final order, or should it rather be in the form of a rule nisa returnable on Friday morning?
It would be a final order.
Final.
It would be a final order that we are
Is
seeking.
that, that's an, and you know, the giving of notice is an arrangement that was made, at least with the two media houses that opposed the very first in-camera application, and leaders undertook that they would always give notice if it's a final order, not breach the arrangement that was made.
Perhaps if I take a step back and we look at the circumstances that led to the moving of this application, we have been preparing with the witness. What brought us to this point, I would say, is the extent to which the evidence leaders were insisting certain evidence be put to the commissioners. The witness would have been somewhat prepared to testify as to some facts, but it would have been a very superficial kind of testimony. And in order to do a proper job and give proper perspective, the evidence leaders, quote unquote, drove the witness to disclose as much as possible, and I think to a point of discomfort for the witness. So this was not a witness intended to go in camera. It is the facts surrounding his testimony that have forced this application. And hence, it was not moved yesterday or Friday. And we're taking opportunity of the start today to move it.
My inclination, but I've not had a discussion with my co-commissioners, is to grant the condonation.
Thank you, Chair.
But I'm loath to deny the media the opportunity to at least respond. What prejudice, if any, would be suffered if a rule neither is issued with the media to respond not later than, I was thinking of Thursday, for example. But in the event that we do grant the application eventually, so as not to you for purposes of Friday, in the morning on Friday, you will choose whether or not you want to reply. Maybe you'll do so overnight on Thursday if you want to reply. At least the media will have been given an opportunity to consider the application and, if need be, possibly respond to it. Would you suffer any prejudice?
Mandatory national instructions and protocol for the seizure of drugs. Can proceed from paragraph 35.
Thank you, Commissioners. The DPCI is mandated to address both CDLs, where synthetic drugs are manufactured, and the importing and exporting of drugs. Most seizures depend on intelligence either from informants or international law enforcement agencies, or when it's stumbled upon by port authorities. During a seizure operation, preserving the crime scene for further investigation and the gathering of evidence is crucial. It requires the involvement of various units, including members of the South African National Narcotic Enforcement Bureau, SANEP, detectives, crime intelligence, forensic experts from the Forensic Science Laboratory, local criminal record center, and the protection team to cordon off the scene. Crime scenes must be processed in accordance with National Instruction 1 of 2015, Crime Scene Management, to ensure the integrity of the scene and preserve the integrity of the evidence collected at the crime scene. Failure to do so will inevitably lead to the contamination of the crime scene, to the destruction or non-gathering of evidence, which will ultimately defeat the objective of a seizure operation and compromise subsequent criminals. The 2015 National Instruction is based on international best practice. A copy is attached here to and marked F1.
And we'll get to it and deal with it in detail later, but you can continue to paragraph 37.
Aspects of crime scene management at the drug seizure crime scene, whether at the CDL or elsewhere, such as the harbour.
Just a moment. Can this not be shown on the screen, please? Paragraph 37. We can
Okay.
talk to it, but can you just please not show it on the screen? Thanks.
Can continue.
The most important aspects of crime scene management at the drug seizure crime scene, whether at the CDL or elsewhere, such as the harbour, are the following. The crime scene must be cordoned off to ensure that no unauthorized individuals gain access to the scene. Ensure that the necessary role players are present or on standby. In a container drug bust, this would be at the minimum be the DPCI K9 Dog and LCRC to collect evidence, including taking photographs of exhibits and of the scene processing procedures undertaken. FSL must be present at a CDL seizure, but are not strictly required at any other drug bust unless the investigation team considers it necessary.
Can you just explain that, why would they not be FSL? What is FSL? What division do they fall under? And why wouldn't they necessarily be at any other drug bust but CDL?
Commissioners, FSL is the Forensic Science Laboratory, and the reason why they are specifically called out to clandestine drug laboratories is because of the sophistication involved with those processes that's taking place there. For instance, they are specializing in the dismantling of these clan labs and the gathering of the necessary evidence from those scenes. It's very hazardous circumstances under which these drugs are manufactured. They have the necessary equipment to dismantle it. And then they must also take samples of an array of chemicals from those crime scenes. So it's rather complicated crime scenes, and it requires experts within that space. That compared to a normal narcotics in this instance now cocaine, from a container, you do not necessarily need that expertise. The local criminal record center investigators is more than adequate to deal with those crime scenes.
And under what division does the FSL fall under?
FSL falls within the detectives and forensic services under the divisional commissioner for that space. Currently, it is Major General Mogale is acting in the post, but the actual incumbent is Lieutenant General Sentumule, who's currently the Deputy National Commissioner, the acting Deputy National Commissioner for the Detective Service.
Thank you, General. Then on page 1437.3.
The crime scene investigator must keep proper record of the crime scene by means of contemporaneous notes. Photographs must be taken to illustrate the scene and to allow the chronological sequence of events. All exhibits must be examined for fingerprints and touch DNA, which are crucial in drug busts because of the clandestine nature of drug trafficking. Where drugs are stored in a container with legitimate cargo, there is usually no direct evidence of who or where. Fingerprints and DNA may be the only evidence that could ultimately link the drugs to the individuals who placed it in the container. All exhibits must be sealed in forensic seal bags with unique seal numbers before being removed from the crime scene. And once all these processes have been completed, the scene must be restored and handed back to the competent recipient. Exhibit management is equally important. Exhibit management.
Thank you. Sorry, I think that's fine. I was just calling what you do at the actual scene of the crime, and we just needed to be sensitive about that. But the process going forward, I think you can display.
Thank you, Commissioner Kumalo. I think we'll start when we deal with the new topic. It's fine. Thank you. You may proceed, General.
Thank you, Commissioners. Exhibit management is equally important. Improper exhibit management can be fatal to a successful prosecution. Exhibit management must be done in accordance with National Instruction 8 of 2017 and attached and marked as, whilst all instructions are important, the most crucial in a drug seizure are the following. The exhibit must be handed in at the police station in the area where the exhibit was seized. All property and exhibits seized must be entered in the SAP 13 register of the relevant police station where the crime was committed or where the property was found, and then transferred to the relevant unit and entered in the SAP 13 of the relevant unit. The SAP 13 registers of these units must be inspected regularly. All drugs, excluding dagga and kat, must be forwarded to FSL with effect, but not later than 7 working days in exceptional circumstances and destruction, irrespective of whether a case docket has been registered, includes all drugs found abandoned.
When you say all drugs, I know we're still going to be discussing the Port Shepstone, but other big busts as well. Sampling, where does it fit in? Where it's not the whole consignment that is taken to the laboratory, but only a portion of it. What regulates that?
Commissioners, under normal circumstances, there is no need to obtain samples at the crime scene. What is being done during cocaine seizures is that there is a presumptive test that is being done. So what that means is that the lead investigator or the crime scene would make a small hole in one of the bricks, obtain a small sample, then place that sample into a chemical basis, and that's the presumptive test. And if it colors blue, it means that indeed it's cocaine. So that's the only sampling that needs to be done at that point in time. Maintain the credibility of the crime scene. It's important that all the necessary tests were conducted by our experts to seal the exhibits there and then, because then you also maintain the chain of custody effectively so. So you've done your counting, you've done your photographs, the investigation to perhaps lift fingerprints or touch DNA from the exhibits. All those processes are completed. Then the exhibits must be sealed without delay on the crime scene. So there's no real need for investigators to obtain samples there, because in any event, the exhibits must be submitted to the forensic science laboratory.
So General, what we see on TV where they test it with their tongue, that's not how it works in real life.
I will not advise that, Commissioner.
Thank you. General, why does it exclude dagga and...
Commissioners, kat is a plant that's originating from North Africa. Obviously, and that plant needs to be submitted to FSL within a specific period, because otherwise it becomes rotten. So only samples are taken and then submitted to FSL. That's the only sampling. With dagga, obviously, it means that when a cultivation facility is dismantled, you might sit with a whole warehouse full of dagga. So it's just not practically possible to submit that whole consignment for analysis to the forensic science laboratory. So it's all about practicality. Here, obviously, the whole process was upside down, to say the least. And it was never supposed to happen like that. So if General Sonona had proper control over the key, he was supposed to open that and not provide the key to anybody under his command to go into that facility, because he will never be able to account for what transpired there in his absence.
I think the question is also a different one, is in the normal course, would the custodian have a register of every person that had entered the strong room? or asked to the key so that there's a record of who went into the strong room?
Commissioners, because the only reason why an investigator will go back to an SAP 13 will be to book out the exhibits that was previously booked in and to take it to the Forensic Science Laboratory and then obviously sign for it in the register. So there's no specific provision for investigators to go into that type of facilities. There will be no proper explanation for that, except for booking out exhibits.
Suppose, unless an investigator, such as, let's say, Mpanga say, he puts it in his diary or in his book where he says, I got in at this time, this is what I did, and that would be the record. Otherwise, there's no provision for him getting in and doing the work that he ended up doing in there.
That's correct, Commissioner, supposed to be recorded in a pocketbook.
Thank you.
Then, General, can we deal with the other entry on paragraph 47, which is the 24 June 2021, that the officers then retrieve samples of the exhibits and forward the samples to FSL. So at this stage, the exhibits are in the non-tamper sealed evidence bags. They open the bags and they take a sample. What is your view on that process?
Commissioners, first and foremost, there was no need to go and obtain samples of that bricks of cocaine because the whole consignment, as with all other previous consignments, was supposed to be sent to the Forensic Science Laboratory. There was no need to obtain samples. As I've testified earlier, investigators are not scientists. We do not have knowledge about random sampling for that process to be correctly performed, to enable forensic science to conduct their work effectively and efficiently so. So it does not make sense. The colleagues went back to that facility to obtain samples.
And do you know whether they actually did obtain the samples and send it to FSL?
That's according to the evidence, indeed, there was samples taken and submitted to the Forensic Science Laboratory.
And was there any explanation given by FSL as to why the request was made? Because according to it says that samples to FSL for analysis. So FSL presumably would have requested the sample, or are they doing it of their own initiative?
I'm not sure of the details in relation to that, Commissioners, but I can follow up on that.
Now, if all the exhibits were supposed to go to the FSL, can you think of any reason why samples would be taken beforehand and a day or actually 2 days after the seizure?
Commissioners, from all the other inquiries of similar seizures that I've read and perused, this is the only matter where such samples were obtained. So I find it extremely strange why it would have been done differently now. The only conclusion I can come to is that it was never the intention to take this whole batch of exhibits to the Forensic Science Laboratory.
In other words, it was never the intention for the 541 kilograms?
The 541 bricks. I'm referring to the totality of it, Commissioners.
Thank you, General. There's a special request there because that movement was quite quick, from 9 July, the seizure, to 19 July.
I'm not aware if there was any interventions from the colleagues in Gauteng to facilitate the quick submission of those exhibits, Commissioners.
Thank you. Then, General, I think we were at paragraph 6.
I say this especially because even before the exhibits were stored at Port Shepstone, the premises had not been secure. In the information note, General Mosik refers to 6 break-ins at the premises before June 2021, with the most recent before the theft being on 15 January 2021. Most importantly, on 22 January 2020, Lieutenant Colonel S.R. Singh, Acting Section Commander for Counterintelligence, Crime Intelligence, KZN, submitted a report to the Provincial Head of Crime Intelligence, KZN, Provincial Head of DPCI, KZN, Section Head Operations Crime Intelligence, KZN, Section Commander UGU Cluster, Ugu Cluster Crime Intelligence, KZN, and the National Head Security Standard Counterintelligence to address the security breach at the Port Shepstone premises following the 20 January 2020 break-in. The report is attached to General Mosikiri's information note.
Chair, at this stage, we seek your indulgence for an early adjournment. We are about to deal with the break-ins and General Mosikiri's report and the security shortcomings General needs to do following on some of the that occurred today. And he also wants to have a look at some more information in order to give more detail on this aspect because it seems to have become more important than initially anticipated. He was just supposed to set the scene for the other witnesses to come. So if we could have an early adjournment today to consult with the General and perhaps draft a short supplementary statement where he deals with these additional matters, we'd be indebted to you, Chair.
And we resume at 9:30.
At 9:30, Chair.
Let's adjourn and resume at 9:32.
Thank you.